wisdom, time will rise. Mr. Educator team, sharing the wealth, building things you should do. From trust to banking, it's all a must. Your guide to wealth is learning to trust. Legacy matters to do it right. Dreams take shape with every insight. Wills and assets, life insurance plans, building for your future with expert hands. So toss money and more, building wealth with knowledge galore. Hey, Pat. Dream and watch your dreams overflow. From savings today to trust for life. Breaking generational wealth divides. Healthcare directives, banking tips. We're here to help your fortune eclipse. From savings today to trust for life. Breaking generational wealth divides. Healthcare directives, banking tips. We're here to help your fortune eclipse. And now it's time to learn. So wisdom's your return. Invest, protect, and thrive for sure. Signing off is old talks, money, and more. Good morning, and welcome to another edition of Soul Talks, Money, and More, where we are always educating, enlightening, informing, and empowering our community. I am your host, Dr. Sabrina Edmon Williams, educator, author, and investor, opening minds and closing contracts. I am so noted, and I am so excited and so delighted to be here on this 25th day of May in our Lord 2026. Yes, it is Memorial Day, and we are not taking the day off. Some of us, Mr. Armstrong, have to come on in and work. It's not a holiday for everybody. As always, we want to start the show by welcoming our listening audience, our WMPR 90.1 FM listening audience. We are the voice of the community right here in Jackson, Mississippi. And to all of those that are joining us online through either YouTube or Facebook, welcome. Now, before we get started, I know it's a holiday. I know people are sleeping in, but for those of you that are listening, I need everybody, go ahead and call somebody, text somebody, share the live, tell them Dr. Williams is on the air, and they need to tune in this morning because we're starting the week with a conversation that all of us need to be engaged in. All of us need to be a part of this. This is not just another show. This is a conversation about memory. It's a conversation about democracy, a conversation about sacrifice, and a conversation about what happens when we forget. When people forget, it's been said that if you forget your past, you are doomed to repeat your history. So we got some things to say this morning. Now, as you guys know, this is an educational platform, and one of the things that I try to do, the educator in me, is I try to find every opportunity, use every opportunity that I can to really help us to grow and learn things that we may or may not know or may have forgotten. So this morning, we're going to start the show by asking the question, do you really know the history of Memorial Day? Everybody is celebrating, everybody is excited, but do we even know the history of Memorial Day? What are we celebrating? Why are we taking the day off? That's the question that I want to start the show with. Do you know the history of Memorial Day? Because for many people, Memorial Day has become cookouts, hitting the sails, going to the beach, vacationing. You know, it's the official start of the summer season, long weekends. But again, the question is, do you really know the history of Memorial Day? Because if you really understood and you really knew the history, you would know that Memorial Day was born out of grief. Now, I need to help somebody. I'm not talking to everybody, but I am talking to somebody. Let's go ahead and make the distinction because a lot of times people get this mixed up. The difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day. Memorial Day honors those who pass, our military members who pass while serving the country, okay? Veterans Day honors those who are still living. That's the holiday that we celebrate in November. So a lot of times people are sending shout outs or doing, putting messages up on their social media, and we get it confused. So just in case you need to be reminded, or even if you didn't know, it's okay if you don't know. That's what this show is about. Memorial Day, we are honoring the sacrifices, those who gave their lives. You know, they say some gave, all gave some, but some gave all. And that's who we are remembering today. Okay. Again, Memorial Day is a holiday that was born out of grief, out of war, sacrifice, and out of remembrance. And what many Americans do not know is that some historians actually trace one of the earliest Memorial Day celebrations or commemorations back to formerly enslaved Black Americans in Charleston, South Carolina in 1865. Get that. So it is, and this has been documented. History shows this, and this is why it's good to know your history, okay? According to historical accounts documented by scholars at institutions, including the Smithsonian Magazine and Yale University, historians, Black residents in Charleston organized a ceremony honoring Union soldiers who had died in a Confederate prison camp. And as I understand it, these Confederate soldiers were basically just put in a mass grave. And for those that may not know what that means, it's just like you dig a hole and you just throw bodies into the hole and you cover it up. This is what was done to Black Union soldiers who were doing what people are doing today, fighting for rights, fighting for this country. Let me say that again. According to historical accounts documented by scholars at institutions, including the Smithsonian Magazine, as well as Yale University, Black residents in Charleston, South Carolina, organized a ceremony honoring Union soldiers who had died in a Confederate prison camp. And this is one of, if not the earliest Memorial Day observance in American history. And it was organized by formerly enslaved Black people. Okay. I don't know how many of you knew that, because that's not something you were probably taught in your history classes. That's probably not a little fact, well-known fact that we find in history books, or that would have been in our history books when I was in school, and certainly not in the history books now. People at that time had every reason to be bitter. Look at the circumstances. We're talking 1865. People had been denied humanity. People had suffered violence, bondage, separation, and oppression. And yet, they stopped to honor sacrifice. They dug up those bodies from that mass grave, as I understand it, and they reburied those soldiers with dignity. They held a parade with thousands of Black children, teachers, ministers, and citizens singing songs of freedom. That's history. And that's not just Black history. That's American history. It's not opinions. It's not politics. It is our history. And again, this isn't a fact that you're not going to see, you're not likely to see, I'll put it that way, in history books. Many of us didn't know that. I know, and I'll be very 100 and transparent here. This is something I recently learned. Mr. Armstrong, I'm not trying to put you on Main Street, but did you know that the first or one of the earliest celebrations of this holiday that we are commemorating today was actually first observed by Black folks? Most of us don't know this history. Yesterday in our Sunday school class, we actually talked about this whole idea of the Pharisees and how they had their traditions, and you did the fasting at certain times of the year. And at one point, they tried to catch Jesus up in some stuff. They came to Jesus and said, well, now this is the time when we are supposed to have the fast, but you got your folks over there and they not fasting. How do you explain yourself? Because this is what we are supposed to do. And, Jesus had to put them in check and said, wait a minute now, the bridegroom is still here. These folks don't have to do this. They ain't got nothing to be in mourning for until after the bridegroom is gone. Sometimes we do things because they are tradition without really even fully understanding why we are doing it. What is the history? What is the origin? And I believe, and I'm just going to say this, that a lot of times, many of us are doing it just because that's the way we've always done it. We've never questioned why we are doing things the way we do them. Why are we celebrating? Why do we get the day off? What is the history behind Memorial Day? I think if we understood things and if we understood the origin of a lot of the different days that we commemorate, then that would make them a lot more sacred. That would make them a lot more honored, and not just another day off, not just another day to have a cookout, So let's think about that. Now, as I was thinking about this whole idea of Memorial Day and commemorating and remembering, this morning, I cannot help but reflect on that history and think about this past week's Mississippi Day of Action, Mississippi Fights Back voter rally. And I'll tell you why and where I'm going with this. After attending the rally and covering the rally, if you missed it, if you were not in attendance, go over to my Facebook page. I Am So Noted. That's IAMSEWNOTED. I literally tried to capture as much as I could capture so that we would have this documented as part of history, because it will be go down as a historical event, something that happened in the state of Mississippi. I've read a lot of the different commentary and comments. I've had people to come on my page with questions and comments about the event. Had an opportunity during the event to meet people from all over the state of Mississippi and beyond. But now there was one thing, a question that kept surfacing over and over again. And that question is, what are y'all really fighting for? What is this fight about? You're talking about Mississippi Fights Back, the voting rally. What are y'all fighting for? And I had to think about that, you guys, and really ponder that question, because I think the answer that you get will depend on who you ask the question. Okay? I had other people that questioned who's taking your voting rights. I don't understand what y'all complaining about. Y'all can still go to the polls and vote. Who's taking your voting rights? But perhaps the most dangerous question of all was, why are Black people still talking about voting rights? After all, this is 2026. What y'all talking about? Whew, well, that gave me cause to pause. And I'm at a point in my life where I am trying to be more reflective not reactive, but to actually take the time to really think about why people are at what they're asking me, first of all, and why they're asking the question, where the questions are coming from, so that I can give a more thoughtful response to their questions. Now, first, before I even get started, let me just be clear about something. I want to go on record of just saying something so that everybody understands where Dr. Williams is coming from. Because again, when you ask that question, what are y'all fighting for? The answer that you get is going to depend on who you ask the question. So I want to be clear and let everybody know, my WNPR listening audience, my YouTube and my Facebook viewing audience, what I am fighting for and what this is about for me. Okay, I'm speaking for me, Dr. Sabrina Edmon Williams. Now, this is not about blind loyalty to one political party. That is not what I am fighting for. This is not about worshiping a particular politician. That is not what I am fighting for. This is not about one candidate over another. Don't get it twisted. That is not what this is about. Because politicians, they come and they go, right? But rights, your rights matter. So that's not what this is about for me. Again, the answer to that question will depend on who you are asking the question. What I will say is representation does matter. Access does matter. Fairness does matter. And history does matter. People who forget their history becomes comfortable repeating it. We need to remember some things. Now, let us deal with a few facts. Black Americans have not always had the right to vote. We got to remember that, because I think some people forget. When they ask you, what are you fighting for? It's a very concerning question for me, especially when it comes from Black folks. Let me say that again. When that question comes from Black folks, it is a very concerning question. What are you fighting for? Because I am seasoned enough to remember the fact that Black Americans have not always had the right to vote. After the Civil War, the 15th Amendment was ratified in 1870, prohibiting the denying of citizens the right to vote based on their race. So prior to that, if you were Black, you could not vote simply because of your race. But now, just because something becomes a law doesn't mean that it becomes a reality. Do I need to say that again? Just because something becomes a law does not mean it becomes reality. Because after Reconstruction came poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, violence, intimidation, lynching, economic retaliation. Black people were threatened for daring to register to vote. So now you have this thing called the 15th Amendment, which says you have the right to vote. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't a piece of cake. It wasn't a walk in the park. Again, Black folks had to overcome poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, violence, intimidation, lynching, economic retaliation, just to have the right to vote. What are we fighting for? What are we fighting for? We can't forget that. And I think some of us have forgotten. Some people even lost their jobs. Sound familiar? How many Black women lost their job just at the start of the new administration? How many folks lost jobs? Some people lost their homes, lost their very lives for daring to register to vote, even though the 15th Amendment said they had the right to vote. People marched, people bled, people died, not for a party. Again, don't get it twisted. It's never been about a particular party. I think some folks are confused. It's not about a party. It's about participation, having the right to participate in the process. And this is why I say Memorial Day and voting rights, in my opinion, connect more than people actually realize. Both involve sacrifice. Both involve people who paid a price for freedoms many now casually ignore. Some fought on the battlefields overseas. Others fought on bridges right here in America. Imagine that. You know, I often hear my father talk about during his lifetime having classmates that were in the Vietnam War, who, while they were fighting in Vietnam, their children, their families were right here in the United States fighting for the right to go to school, the right to drink out of a water fountain, the right to go through the front door instead of the back door. Some fought on the battlefields overseas, but others fought right here on American soil. What are we fighting for? Some dare ask. Some soldiers carried rifles, others carried voter registration forms. But guess what? Both of them were fighting for freedom. Think about that. There were some folks on the battlefields losing their very lives, willing to give their very lives, the ultimate sacrifice. Yet there were some right here on American soil. They didn't have a rifle in their hands. They simply had a voter registration form. But they both were fighting for freedom. And this week, as the conversations continue around voting rights and people are asking the question and wondering, what was all the fuss about on Wednesday? You know, we have to really think about, what are they asking us? Are these folks confused? How long ago was this? Wasn't that long ago. Wasn't that long? Now, the 60s were not that long ago. Maybe long enough for, let's say, maybe some of the Gen Zs and, you know, all of these younger generations to forget. And even that's on us. That's a sign that we did not do our jobs in passing on our history to our children. We waited for other folks to do it. And I just told you, a lot of our history is not in the history books. It's not in the history books. We get upset when people tell us that this is being removed and this book is being removed from the libraries and the school libraries. And, you know, they're not going to be talking about this and they're going to be teaching our children this. My question becomes, what are we teaching them? Do we even know our own history? Those that are watching me on Facebook and YouTube, if you are bold enough, if you're honest enough, and if you don't mind, I want to hear from you. Did you know that you can trace Memorial Day the origins of Memorial Day, back to Black folks. Did you know it? That's something that we have not been taught. And those who did know didn't teach other folks because not enough of us know our history. We don't know it. And the things that we do know, we're not doing a good job of passing them forward. This is how a people forgets where they come from. And then we have those that are out there that want us to forget, that encourage us to forget. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in this second half hour. I'm looking at the clock, Mr. Armstrong, and I think this is a good time to go ahead and take a station break. For those of you, I see a few more people joining us on Facebook and YouTube, and I'm hoping that my WMPR audience is tuning in. Y'all up and moving this morning. Come on in the room. Come on and join this conversation on the other side of this station break because we are talking about Memorial Day. We're talking about movements and we are talking about this Mississippi Day of Action that occurred last Wednesday. And we are answering the question that many people are asking us. What are you fighting for? Well, I'm glad you asked. Come on back on the other side of this break and I'm going to break it down for you. Throw it to you, Mr. Armstrong.
Of this program is underwritten by Unity Learning Center. Unity Learning Center, better known as ULC, the place where we teach. We don't babysit. The home of Little Johnny, located at 6045 Highway 18 West in Jackson, Mississippi. We're open 6:30 a.m. until 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. We serve breakfast, lunch, and a snack. Our teaching curriculum is ABETA, one of the best, serving children 6 weeks to 5 years old in our preschool. Let's not forget about our after-school care, serving children 6 years to 12 years old. Your search is over for childcare. It stops right here because you found Unity Learning Center. For more info, it's 601-922-6003. That's 601-922-6003. And ask for Mrs. Armstrong. WFBR is proud to have Unity Learning Center as an underwriter.
All right. We're back. If you're just tuning in, welcome to another edition of Soul Talks Money and More. And this is actually the Memorial Day edition of Soul Talks Money and More. I am your host, Dr. Sabrina Edmon Williams. And this morning we are talking about memorials, movements, and making our voices heard. What are we fighting for? That's the question that has been asked of me. And I'm giving you my perspective. Again, everybody's response to that question may be different depending on who you ask. But Dr. Williams is here to share what I am fighting for, what I value, and what I encourage you to think about. Again, this conversation this morning is not about party loyalty, because if I'm being honest, since I've already stuck my toe in the water, I may as well go on and get my ankles wet. If I'm being honest, as I see it, you got two major parties here in the United States, but it's all one party. It's all one. They all the same, y'all. I promise they are all the same, cut from the same cloth. They are all the same people. My goodness. And I could do a whole show to explain to you why I say they are all the same. This is not about party loyalty. It's time for us to wake up and start thinking for ourselves, my people. Okay, everybody is trying to do what benefits them. That's why I say that. You have people that are elected to represent you and your best interests. And sometimes you have to wonder, do they even know what matters to you? Are they really advocating for you, or are they advocating for themselves? How has your life changed as a result of folks being in office versus how their lives have changed as a result of them being in office? You don't believe me? Go check some of these folks' out that represents you. Many of them leave their districts and they're not wealthy people, but they stay in Congress long enough. Yeah. Again, that's a whole conversation right there. I digress because that ain't what we're here to talk about this morning. I'm going to bring this on back. As conversations continue around voting rights and redistricting, many people are asking questions about recent court decisions and changes happening across the country. Now, I want to talk carefully and factually for a minute. Recently, the United States Supreme Court issued a major ruling in the case of Louisiana versus Callis, a case centered around Louisiana's congressional voting map and the creation of a second majority Black district. Okay, everybody's eyes, the whole country's eyes, were watching and awaiting this ruling from the United States Supreme Court, because we knew that based on the outcome of that ruling, that could shift things dramatically. And in fact, it did. The court ruled in a 6-3 vote that Louisiana's maps were unconstitutional, racial gerrymander, even though the state had created the district in response to earlier Voting Rights Act challenges that argued that Black voters were not being fairly represented. Again, people, this is not about political parties. This is not about an individual politician. This is about folks having representation. Representation. And why does that matter? Why does representation matter? Because for decades, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act has been one of the primary tools used to challenge voting maps and election systems that dilute the voting strength of Black Americans and other minority groups. Historically, plaintiffs could challenge voting systems by showing the discriminatory impact of district lines, even if they could not prove lawmakers openly admitted racial intent. But critics of the ruling argued that the Supreme Court has now made those challenges much harder by shifting the legal standard closer toward requiring proof of intentional discrimination rather than simply discriminatory results. So now we got to prove that your intentions were to discriminate. Why does it matter? So I was listening to, I think, Attorney Whitehead's show last Friday, and I heard this analogy, but I didn't hear all of it. So I know I'm going to mess this up. But here's the gist of what this young lady said, as I understood it. And I thought it was a very good analogy because it makes it very simple. So she used an analogy of pumpkin pie versus sweet potato pie. And it's kind of funny to me because I was literally at a family repast on Saturday, and my husband and his niece were sitting there, and they were salivating over what looked really, really good to them. And they thought it was a sweet potato pie, because you know many Black folks like sweet potato pie, okay? But then when my husband bit into the pie, he quickly realized that what he thought was sweet potato pie was actually pumpkin pie. So I thought that was a really good analogy of using the sweet potato pie versus the pumpkin pie. So it went something like this. So imagine, let's say if you had, I'm going to use 5 pies to represent, let's say, the state of Mississippi, okay? And let's not go 5. I'm going to say 3. And I told you I'm going to mess up the analogy. If you want to hear how she said it, go to Attorney Whitehead's Facebook page and look up the actual analogy. But for purposes of today's conversation, we're going to use 3 pies, because I think about a third of the state of Mississippi is actually Black Mississippians. Okay, so A third of the pie is sweet potato pie. Okay. And 2/3 of the pie represents pumpkin pie. Okay. Well, if I am partial to sweet potato pie and I'm in that third, and you take me and you move me from the section that has the sweet potato pie and you move me over to the 2/3 that has the pumpkin pie, what's the chance that I'm ever gonna get any sweet potato pie if it's put to a vote when everybody else that's over there in that section likes pumpkin pie? Think about that. How will you ever get any sweet potato pie? Ain't gonna happen. Ain't gonna happen. I can't make it more plain than that and more clear than that. That's why representation matters. It gives you an opportunity. You're already outvoted by the fact that it's 2/3 of the folks that like the pumpkin pie versus the 1/3 that likes the sweet potato pie. You already outvoted. So at least having some representation at least gives you a seat at the table. Can I make it any clearer? Miss Armstrong, that clear as mud. That clear as mud. Okay. So I'm going to get on back over here, come back on script. Okay. In other words, many voting rights advocates fear that ruling from the Supreme Court weakens one of the last remaining enforcement mechanisms of the Voting Rights Act. And you wonder what we're fighting for. Why should we even have to fight? But we do. That matters because redistricting is not just politics. District lines determine representation. Who gets heard? Who gets resources? Who has influence? Who gets protected? And who gets ignored? Representation matters. And let me just say this, whether you have representation or not, you're still going to pay taxes. So you want a system of taxation with no representation, right? And that somehow makes sense. You want people to literally take your tax dollars. Remember, before you get your check, before it ever comes to you, I don't care how many hours you work a day, a week, a month. Before you get yours, money comes out of your paycheck to be paid into a system. But yet you're not supposed to have any representation whatsoever. You got folks that say they are acting on your behalf, but they don't even know what it looks like on your side of the street, nor do they care. Do they ever come on your side of the street, your side of the block? They don't care. And you are supposed to somehow be okay with that? Come on, people. Come on, people. We've been hoodwinked. Sometimes power is not taken by blocking the ballot box. Sometimes it is taken by drawing the map. You can literally draw the map in such a way that you disenfranchise a whole segment of the population. Now, let me say this carefully this morning. People can disagree politically about how districts should be drawn. That is part of democracy. But what cannot be denied is the historical reality that Black voting power has often been weakened in America through both law and redistricting. Now, that's my concern. When our governor, Tate Reeves, before even the decision came down, he jumped up and said, as soon as the decision comes down, we're having a special session right here in Mississippi. So did Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, all these southern states, Florida, they all did it. We gotta redraw these districting maps. My question is why? Why is that so important? Why was it so important for Texas? They started this stuff. Why was it so important to redraw the maps? After all, we do live in America and we do things right and fair in America, right? After all, right? People asking me, what you fighting for? What is the fight about? That's why so many people are paying attention to this moment. Because history has taught us that rights are rarely lost all at once. They are often weakened little by little, decision by decision, line by line. And here in Mississippi and across the South, conversations about redistricting continue because district lines determine representation. I'm going to let that sit for a moment. For those that are asking me, what are you fighting for? District lines determine representation. Now, it's okay for you. If you're okay with not having any representation and anybody to hear your voice and anybody to move your concerns forward, if you're fine with that, I'm okay with that for you. But that's not what I want for myself. District lines determine who gets heard, who gets resources, who gets political influence. District lines are not just lines on a map. That's not what it's about. They can shape power for generations to come. Think about how many people go to Congress as public servants and make it a public career. They make it a lifelong career. Generations can be impacted by how these district lines are drawn. Didn't you hear me say folks don't go to Congress poor and come back poor? Think about that. So the generations of their family being positively impacted while generations of your family staying the same. Y'all better wake up. When people can't silence your voice directly, sometimes they simply redraw the map around it. When they can't shut you up, they just redraw the map. Redraw the map around it. Now, somebody listening this morning may say, well, Dr. Sabrina, why keep bringing up race? Why keep bringing up history? You know, that's in the past. Why not just move on? And that question right there reveals the problem. Because every other ethnic group in America is encouraged to remember. Everybody else is encouraged to remember their history. People visit Holocaust museums all across this country. People commemorate Pearl Harbor. People celebrate independence movements. People preserve family ancestry. But when Black people remember slavery, segregation, disenfranchisement, or discrimination, suddenly the conversation shifts. Oh, that was a long time ago. Y'all just need to get over that. Oh, that wasn't you. That was your ancestors. Why are you harping on that? Or, as I've heard recently, it wasn't really that bad. Slavery wasn't really that bad. Now, imagine, if you will, if you dare, imagine telling a Jew to forget about the Holocaust. Forget your historical trauma. Forget about it. Get over it. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't you. It was your ancestors. Why y'all remembering that? Why you commemorating that? Just imagine telling any other ethnic group that, to forget the historical trauma while the systems connected to that history still shape outcomes today. That's why I say we got to wake up, people. We got to wake up. Why are folks telling us to forget? I can understand other folks telling us, but what I cannot understand is when our own people want to act like stuff didn't happen. They've forgotten. They have forgotten. But yet we sit here today commemorating, remembering Memorial Day. Memorial Day is literally a holiday about refusing to forget sacrifice. So my question becomes, why should Black Americans be expected to forget our sacrifice? Why is it okay for us to forget that? Some of you need to ask yourselves, because I think some of us are delusional. Some of us are delusional. Maybe it's because we're now not in the hood anymore. Maybe it's because we now live in a nicer house or we drive a nicer car. And that's fine and that's good, because guess what? Dr. Williams does too. But the reality is, how dare I forget my history? Why should remembering suddenly become divisions only when Black people do it? Divisiveness. That's a term, we threw that term around a lot, especially during the Obama administration. Everything was divisive. We're trying to divide. We're trying to, just divide this country just because people want to remember. Memory becomes dangerous when it challenges comfortable narratives. Let me say this carefully this morning. I'm going to tread lightly here. Remembering history does not mean hating America. Stop letting these folks tell you that we hate America just because we want to remember our history. What's wrong with it? What is wrong with us remembering our history? America wants to remember theirs. They've been preparing for the last year for a 250th celebration, and it's okay. But we are okay with allowing other people to convince us that we gotta forget our history. What are you fighting for, Dr. Williams? What's the fight about? Many people fight because they love this country. They love this country enough to believe that we can do better. We can do better. It ain't about making America great again. America ain't never been great. It's about making America great. We can do better than what we are doing. We better wake up. Real patriotism is not pretending that problems never existed. That's not real patriotism. Real patriotism is loving a country enough to demand it to live up to its promises. And that, my friend, that takes courage. That takes courage. So I applaud those who came before us. I applaud the Fannie Lou Hamers, the Medgar Evers. I applaud them. The Cheney, Goodman, Schwerner. I applaud them for daring to make their voices heard. I applaud them. Now, I got to tell you something that moved me personally deeply about that Mississippi Fights Back voter rally last Wednesday. What I saw, I was there. I saw young people, elderly people, Black people, white people, people from Mississippi, people from other states, different backgrounds, different experiences, but sharing one concern. We cannot afford apathy, because one of the greatest threats to democracy is not disagreement, it's disengagement. We can disagree. It's okay. We can disagree. That's why I keep telling you, it is not about party or party loyalty. We cannot afford to become disengaged. And I've had so many people to just send me stuff and, videos and this and that and the other. And I get that, some people are making the decision to just leave the country and leave us behind. And, hey, y'all deal with it. We're going to go here and there and the other. And I respect that. I respect everybody's right to do what is best for them. But at the end of the day, for those that are going to stay, are you going to roll over and die? What are you going to do? If you're going to be here, what are you going to do? Democracy does not disappear overnight. It disappears when good people slowly stop participating. Now, there was a young brother that said something on the stage last week that stayed with me. He said, do something. Just do something. Simple words, but powerful words. Because too many people think they cannot do everything, and so they choose to do nothing. But history has never moved forward because everybody did everything. History moved because enough people did something. Some people marched, some people organized, some people educated, some voted, some prayed, some spoke up, some ran for office, some simply refused to stay silent. But they did something. So now if you want to know again, what am I fighting for? What is the fight for this morning? Let me make it plain. I am fighting for a country where my worth is not measured by the color of my skin. I had nothing to do with that. That was predetermined, predestined before I ever got here. And if you got a problem with that, you take it up with my creator. I had nothing to do with that. But I'm fighting to live in a country where my worth is not determined or measured by my skin color. I am fighting for equal access. I am fighting for fair representation. Here's the kicker right here. I'm fighting for truth. I'm fighting for truth. I am fighting so our children do not inherit silence instead of opportunity. I'm fighting because too many people sacrifice too much for us to casually surrender participation. Let me say that again because somebody needs to hear that this morning. Too many people sacrificed too much for us to casually surrender participation. And no, this is not about perfection. America has never been and never will be perfect. But progress only happens when people refuse to become comfortable with injustice. Silence has never protected oppressed people. Participation at least gives us a fighting chance. So this Memorial Day weekend, while people are gathered with family, barbecues, travel, and celebration, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with joy, I want us to also remember. I want us to remember sacrifice. I want us to remember struggle. I want us to remember progress. And remember those who fought to open doors. Many of us are now privileged to walk through casually. And most importantly, I want us to do something. Do something. Register. Vote. Volunteer. Educate yourself. And when you educate yourself, then start educating some other folks. Attend meetings, talk to your children, read your history, learn your history. That's why we fall for anything. That's what's wrong with many of our children. They don't know from whence they come. They don't know that they're royalty because we have allowed other people to teach them. We've allowed other people to set the narrative for them. We have not set it ourselves. I need to do something. Challenge this misinformation. Support truth, because democracy is not self-sustaining. And rights ignored eventually becomes rights endangered. So this morning, as we bring this episode to a close, I want to leave you with this thought. Memorial Day teaches us that sacrifice should never be forgotten. And perhaps the greatest disrespect to sacrifice is apathy. People died defending freedoms many people now refuse to even participate in protecting. So no, I will not forget. I will not forget the soldiers that were buried in those mass graves in cemeteries. I will not forget the marches and the marchers beaten on bridges. That's why I went over to Selma, Alabama. Been there a couple of times. That's why I wanted to walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And I encourage you to take your children. Go do it yourself. Take your children. Walk across the bridge. They have a commemoration every year. Take your children. Teach them our history. I will never forget that people were denied the ballot. I won't forget that the voices have been silenced. And I refuse to teach the next generation to forget either. Stop letting these folks tell us it wasn't that bad. Stop letting these folks tell us we should forget our history. And you know, since my toe is already in the water, I'm going to go ahead and get my ankles wet. After this past week, seeing that even though we don't have any money to expand Medicaid, even though we don't have any money to make sure that these mothers and these babies that are dying right here in the state of Mississippi have the resources that they need, we have at least $1.8 billion that we can compensate people who were their rights were infringed upon because they made a decision to go storm the Capitol. And you gonna let me think that we can't do no better? Oh, yes, we can. You gonna make me think that we need to forget our history? Oh, no, you won't. You may choose to forget yours, but I'm not gonna forget, because memory matters. Participation matters. Representation matters. And if freedom is worth honoring, then democracy is worth protecting. I am your host. I am your host this morning, Dr. Sabrina Edmon Williams, educator, author, and investor, opening minds and closing contracts. I am so noted. I want to wish each and every one of my viewers and my listeners a happy Memorial Day. Let's take some time to really reflect and think about what we're doing. And I want to encourage you to join the fight. It's time. It's time to speak up. Stop being silent. Stop being apathetic. Just because life is great on your side of the street, it ain't great for everybody. Stop it. You don't know what the future holds for your family. We all been hoodwinked, you guys. If you ain't in the millionaire, billionaire, trillionaire club, we all been hoodwinked. We all in the same boat. And as long as people can keep us fighting against each other and making us think that this thing is about a race war, making us think it's, everything that it really is not, all of us lose. At the end of the day, the people that are going to benefit are the folks at the very top of the food chain. So we all need to get it together. And instead of asking what y'all fighting for, it should be what are we fighting for? Our very democracy. So with that being said, again, I want to wish everybody, especially those that are traveling, I got to give a shout out to my nephew, Patrick Black. I had an opportunity to spend some time. It's always a good time when I see my nephew, Patty, told me, Auntie, I'm going to be traveling back to Atlanta tomorrow morning, but I will be tuned in to the show. And I see he was the first person that popped up this morning. So shout out to your nephew. Safe travels to all of you that are traveling, whether you are traveling to your destinations or back to your, your where you're planning to celebrate, or back to your home. Safe travels to you. Be careful out there on the road. So in many places, we are experiencing rain and maybe some inclement weather. So please be careful with your travels. And until next time, remember, you might not be able to do everything, but you can at least do something. So do something. Peace. Money